Hey, everyone who's just coming into the call. We're going to get started here in just a second. But to start off the call today, we're going to have you have your mics off and your camera off. And then we will ask you to turn things back on when we get to the networking portion of the event. So while we let folks filter in, now would be a great time to say hi in the chat box. You can drop your LinkedIn profile link if you want to connect with some people. And I have just a few housekeeping notes to get us started before we start the presentation. So first and foremost, you are in the virtual Wire San Francisco event, Find Your Rhythm, moving forward to stay ahead. My name is Jessica Sage. I'm the marketing director here at Wire. I want to give a thank you briefly to our corporate donors who make Wire possible on a programmatic level. A big thank you to Facebook, Momentive, Verizon, Cint, Daynata, Fieldwork, Forsta, Innovate MR, Insights Now, Kantar, LinkedIn, Material, Protege, Pure Spectrum, Snap, and Taluna for your continued support. I also briefly want to thank our association and media partners for helping to spread the word about today's event. If you are not yet a member of the Wire community, it's very easy to join. Head over to womeninresearch.org. After today's session, join our mailing list. We have a ton of really fun stuff on the horizon. We'll be at IIEX celebrating our 15th year anniversary as an organization. And we also have a webinar next month about new careers in research technology. So be sure to head over to the website after today's session and see what we've got going on. As I mentioned before, we are currently in a Zoom meeting, which is a little bit different than a Zoom webinar. So while we're doing the presentation portion of today's event, if you can keep those mics and cameras off for now, and then when we get to the networking section, we will ask you to turn everything back on. You can use that chat box to say hi. Hello, Scott. I see you saying hi. And you can also pop some questions in there for the Q&A when we get to that part of the presentation. That is all for me. I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to the San Francisco team.
Thank you so much, Jess, and hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for the San Francisco Bay Area Wire Spring event. We are thrilled to be here. We had a couple of false starts last year, and we actually thought maybe we would be able to do it in person, but we are doing a Zoom, and the beauty of that is that we can have so many more of you attending. So we're excited that you're here. Thank you so much. We have a great hour put together for you. We have an incredible panel. I'm going to introduce right now. We have got Bianca Pryor with BET. We've got April Jeffries with Ipsos and Lila Reiner with Logica Research. The way we're going to work the format out today is Lila's going to start us off. As we are all researchers here, we need a little data to get going. She's going to talk a little bit about the Inside the Researcher Mindset study to kick us off. And then we're going to have a panel discussion. Our topic today is finding your rhythm, moving forward to stay ahead. And I'm very excited to get us going. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lila to kick us off. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Bryn and Jessica. I'm Lila Reiner, CEO of Logica Research. I'm super excited to be here today with April, Bianca, and Bryn. Like Bryn said, I'm going to kick us off by sharing a few insights from a pro bono project that we did with Wire last year on what we were calling and are calling the new researcher mindset. This was, like all great research studies, a collaborative effort that Wire sponsored and supported, and we did with Innovate MR, G3 Translate, and Nuance. And if anyone's interested, I can share the full study today. I'm just going to be talking about a couple of the findings to get our conversation going. So this was a 12-minute online study. Just to kind of frame this up and put it in context, this was conducted last summer. And what we really wanted to do was understand how researchers were thinking about sort of the next step in their career and their satisfaction with their employers and the values that they had and that they wanted to see with their employers and how that impacted satisfaction. So this was a worldwide study. We heard from almost 500 researchers, 475 in 42 countries. The majority were from North America, about 2/3 female, and about half millennials and a third Gen Xers. So just kind of keep that in perspective. We worked with about 20 plus organizations to field this study, including a number in the US who get diversity of sample. So we included Black Marketers Association, Insights in Color, and many other to try to expand that sample. And few slides that I'm going to show you. So first of all, on satisfaction, just over half of researchers at that time were satisfied with their career, extremely or very satisfied, and the same percentage satisfied with their employer. Now, one interesting finding is that while this is pretty moderate satisfaction, I know that we would all like to see that be higher for the industry. Satisfaction with employer is pretty similar between the US and other countries. I thought it was interesting that in the US, satisfaction with career is a bit higher at 64% versus 50% in other countries. So we really wanted to look at what was the relationship between satisfaction with career and employer, and then people likelihood to switch jobs. So we all know about the Great Resignation. We're going to be talking a little bit about that today and what it means for people. But what we're seeing on the left here is just about 8 in 10 people who were satisfied with their employer are also satisfied with their career, and just 4% are switching jobs. But on the flip side, for those people who aren't satisfied with their employer, just 20% or 1 in 5 are satisfied with their career, and they're 10 times more likely to switch jobs. And so the final kind of set of findings that we want to share here before we have our panel discussion is looking at that relationship between those values that I mentioned as they take shape and what people saw as a positive outcomes of COVID, and how those positive outcomes of COVID related to satisfaction with employer. So there were 4 key things that we saw in terms of the relationship between how people felt about their employer and how satisfied they are. So first of all, if the employer had a greater emphasis on empathy as a company, satisfaction was higher. 51% of people who saw that in their employer were satisfied versus 21% are not. 40% of people who were satisfied with an employer also saw that their employers had the ability to hire a diverse workforce, so just showing how important that was. Similarly, employers who had a greater emphasis on the importance of childcare and school, those people were more satisfied. And then finally, focusing on decreasing inequalities in our society. If researchers saw that being emphasized in their employers, they also were more satisfied. So today we're going to be talking about some of those things in terms of values and diversity and inclusion as we think about how we move forward with our careers after this 2-year pandemic. So with that, I will kick it back over to you, Bryn.
Thank you so much, Lila. This is really interesting and needed data for both candidates and employers to really understand kind of what's going on in the marketplace. I can tell you from a talent perspective that 10% more likely to be looking for jobs are out there looking for jobs. And they are looking very specifically for the opportunities that they're interested in and what the company can do for them. So it's kind of the dynamic has changed a little bit. And what we're seeing on the employer side is that those that are really getting it and really caring about what their employees think, how they're performing, how they're engaged, they're actually taking a step back. They're even going as far as rewriting those job descriptions, which has taken years to happen. So we are seeing some of these things actually happening in the marketplace. And I would be very curious to hear from each of you what you've been seeing as it relates to this data and these findings within your organization and with your peers. And with that, maybe Bianca, would you like to start us off?
Sure, happy to start. Yeah, so first I just want to state excited to be here and share space with you all. I'd say that what some of my observations has been is definitely an emphasis on ERGs or employee resource groups. I think that, whether a company had 2 or 3 existing ones, I think that there's been an outgrowth of more ERGs, little sub branches of different ERGs, whether it's based off of race and ethnicity or how you identify in terms of gender and sexual orientation. I think that's been beautiful because we all need the support during this time. I'd say that just the resources available to get through like the psychological struggles and the emotional and mental struggles that some of us may have been dealing with are readily available, like the Calm app, Headspace, the Ginger app, the list goes on and on. So what I'm seeing is a topping off of these sorts of resources to help us and support us in this area.
And are you seeing that within your organization as well?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
That's great. That's great. April, would you like to talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing internally in the organization and with your peers?
Yes, I've seen a few things that were really different for me after being in the industry for a while, right? First of all, the way that it's happening for us is that people first coming into the organization seem to be super happy, right? They're new, they're excited, they want to get started. People who've been around for a while seem to be pretty happy from what we've seen. It's that middle ground of people who are sort of at that stage in their life, right? Where they're trying to decide, is this what I want to do? Is this what I want to be doing for the rest of my life? So I think that kind of push towards the end is interesting because, as we started to look at ways to maintain our good employees, right, is to focus on that group to make sure we're doing things for them. A couple of things that we're doing actually at Ipsos that I found, very interesting and different is, one of the things my boss has started doing is she started putting as a signature in our email, because we're a global organization, right? Sometimes you get emails at 3:00 in the morning from another country. She puts in her email, you know what, I know you may be receiving this in the middle of the night, but don't think you have to answer me before 9.
Oh, that's cool.
It's just little things like that
Yeah.
make me feel like, wow, there's empathy there, right? And someone has finally given you a break to say, I don't have to respond immediately. So sometimes it's just the little things that really demonstrate how you really are, having empathy for your employees.
And on that, since you are a global organization, are you seeing differences, for example, between the East Coast and the West Coast? I can say that out here on the West Coast, so many people have said, I'm never going back into an office. And from what I hear, the East Coast is a little bit different. More people are going into the office.
Yeah, well, I can only speak from our experience. What's happening is our West Coast is a little younger. They happen to be, and to be honest, I feel like they like going into the office. They like this.
Oh, interesting.
They enjoy the going in and being with their peers and so forth. On the East Coast, first of all, it's been a little harder because of the who knows when offices are open or not. But I do think people have been more enjoying the work at home just because of the kids situation, and that becomes very difficult to manage if you've got the schools opening and closing and things like that.
Interesting. Lila, do you have anything you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, so one of the things that, the themes that we heard in the study that we did were really just around empathy, like you all have mentioned, and as managers or leaders and employees finding ways to show up for the people you work with. And one of the things that we started doing is, and this may be very West Coasty, but having just a positive recognition. What happened this week when we have our touch base and our staff meetings? What happened this week or what happened yesterday that was something positive? Could be a client interaction or a team interaction or something personal, but really trying to bring the positive in as much as possible and emphasize that.
So on staying on that track, there's been some discussion about how employees aren't really sure that they're getting what they need from their employers. And do you have a sense of what it is that they need? Like what is it that they're truly looking for, or are they kind of going on to the theme of, getting the right track for your mindset? Or is it more than that? Is it more holistic about themselves and really trying to figure out what they want to do, not just for work, but as a whole?
Is that
topic?
open?
It's open. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
Well, I'll start with my Blackboard here, which is questions are the answer. I think that really asking people what they need, and starting with the interview process, and really trying to understand each other, going both ways, right? What's important to you in this next step of your career, in this job, in this employer, and being as clear and articulate and honest about what's important to you as a manager, and trying to have that fit.
And you think when I say you, this is open again. I'm not trying to put Lila just on the spot, but the pandemic has helped this discussion be had, do you think?
I think absolutely so. And I think, Lila, your point is really important. Like, I think what people need is so different individually. And, I'm going to bring this to a diversity discussion for a minute, because one of the things that I saw was, all of a sudden the ERGs opened up, as Bianca talked about, and a lot of companies were talking about, we want to do more research with, Black, Hispanic, whatever. And so the few Black, Hispanic moderators that we had all of a sudden had all of this work coming in on them, right? We had some people who said, you know what, I don't want to be pegged in that area. I want people to understand that I can work much broader than that. And so that's what they needed. They did not need to be brought into everything that we did that mentioned a Black person or a Hispanic person or a gay person. There was some people, and I know a woman in particular, who actually quit. She quit because she wanted to focus just on that. This was where she found her purpose, and this is what she found she wanted to do with her career on a regular basis. So I think, to your point, Lila, I'm sorry, is that you have to really ask people what it is they want, because it is so different from person to person. And to the extent that you try to group people in buckets, it just doesn't work anymore.
I love that. And I would build off that, just taking it back to, if we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think many of us could probably pride ourselves in saying, oh, I was at the top of the pyramid, right? Like, I was self-actualizing, achieving, I belonged to something, I felt proud in my career, all of these like really higher order things. But what the pandemic did is like, boom, knocked us all the way back down to the bottom of the pyramid. And we were just trying to survive. We were trying to get our basic safety needs met, comfort, food, water, PPE, all of that stuff. So now what's happening as the world is slowly opening back up, we're climbing back up that pyramid in my mind. So I think pre-pandemic, that top of the pyramid looked very different for people. And because we've had so much time to sit with, oh my gosh, how do I feel a sense of belonging again post-pandemic? How do I
come down?
Hey, Robin Boyar. Yeah, so how do we feel accomplished again? How do I explore those creative outlets? So I think it's different. Pre-pandemic Bianca is very different top of pyramid to post-pandemic Bianca. So the needs are going to be very different, and what I ask of my employer and what I need and how I show up to work, very, very different.
Would you see that as a positive that's come out of the pandemic?
For me, yes, for me,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think it's forced me to reckon or work through things I might have been delaying or avoiding. And I'll be very vulnerable in this moment. I have a 5-year-old son, and before the pandemic, my mom, she lived with us and she helped me, raise my son. And that was convenient. I could work late nights when I was over at Brain Juicer System 1, and I could head home, dinner was ready. The kid was already tucked in bed, read story time. But now grandma's not here. I'm like in the thick of motherhood, and I'm really in the day to day. So I think that's something I was delaying, and now this is a moment to really force me to work through that and bringing all my selves together as mother Bianca, professional Bianca, other selves into one space and what's important to me.
I love that. I love that. I have an 18-year-old son. So I had him home for this whole junior year, which that was the upside of the pandemic. I'm sure he didn't feel that way, but you can't, that time will never come back. So I totally relate to what you're saying. April, do you see anything that came out positive from the pandemic?
Yeah, well, I think, original question was, was some of those things really positive? And I think some of them may be positive in the long run, right? I think, for example, we have so many jobs to fill right now. That's not so positive because we're all kind of picking up that slack, right? But in the long run, people are going to be where they want to be, and people are gonna, do the things they hadn't thought about doing before. And I think your point about moving up that pyramid, Bianca, is absolutely right. I think people are just rethinking what the top of that pyramid looks like. And I firmly believe that when you're doing what you really want to do, you're only doing it better. So, and I think it will be better for us. I think maybe in the short term, which transitions are always hard, right? It's going to be a little bit of a struggle.
Yeah. On the talent side, I can tell you that we've seen that as it relates to contractors. So you have all of these researchers that have made these decisions that they don't want to go back into the office. They don't want to work for a company. They're not relocatable, although that's kind of off the table these days. Everybody's remote. But you're seeing an increase of researchers working as contractors, which is really interesting kind of turn of events. It used to be you had to be hired and be part of a company. So that's one thing that we're seeing. Lila, have you seen anything positive coming out of the pandemic?
Yeah, well, I think there is maybe awareness to give employees the time and the grace. Bianca, picking up on a word and that you use a lot, which is give people the space and grace that they need to actually understand what they need and see if there's room for them to do that within your organization, or, do you mentor them into something else? But it takes time for everybody. It's not just, like when we did this study last summer, it wasn't that everybody knew exactly what they wanted and what they were going to do, but more that they were thinking about it and allowing that time and space for people to think about it, have those conversations while you sort of figure out what the right fit is too.
That's cool. We want to keep this really positive. I think we're trying to, and you are, I'm not suggesting that that's not happening, but I did want to just kind of put that out there that, we want to help people, like how can they get into the right mindset to move themselves forward. So before we go into our breakout rooms and we have a really fun exercise for them, do you guys have any last thoughts that you'd like to share with the group? It would be a yes, maybe.
I don't know if it's, I'd say like just thinking about the future of work, and I think that this moment in time is giving us giving us a lot of permission to define that ourselves from the bottom up, where historically, I think the definition of work and how you show up was so much, established top down. And now this is really our moment, bottom up, to influence that and to change the course of it, working guidelines, new practices, implementing policies. And I think personally, like for me, that's exciting. And just the early signals that we're seeing, the changes, the being able to, work remotely wherever you need to, or to April's point, setting your own hours and establishing that and articulating that, practicing new things that, really do make a workplace and space much more inclusive and accessible to you. So I think, my message would be to, use your voice, speak up. If you're feeling like something's not meshing between your home life and your working life, that's a moment to speak up and to influence a policy change, and to then, and if everybody does that, then we're really impacting the future of work.
Yep, would agree with that. Lila?
Yeah, I agree, and want to emphasize just the speaking up part and encouraging people to have that conversation, in a productive way. I think, April, you were saying, to help people have that conversation in a persuasive and positive way with their managers if they need something different.
Yeah. I guess I would say, to Bianca's point, the world of work is really changing. The Gen Zers and the millennials have, if you think about it, they have experienced work completely different than us. We're not a part of those groups, right? They know they can work there. They know that the office, they know what it brings and they know what it doesn't bring. So I would encourage people to think about that when it comes to organizations, because it's just not what it used to be. I feel like we've all kind of gone through a midlife crisis of sorts.
Together.
like everybody had one at the same time. So how do you deal with that? And how does your organization and its purpose and its mission and all of those things that sort of got you started in the first place, how can that somehow kind of filter through to your people? Because, we talk about this meaning quotient now, right? I've heard it was IQ, EQ, now it's MQ. How do people have meaning in their work? And I think that's become important to people as we all go through our crisis here. How do I make sure that what I'm doing has meaning? And how can we, as the world of work, provide that for people?
And I think that as a whole, people have realized that they're much more creative than they think they are, and that they actually have the ability to do that. One of the things that I saw, was right with Wire and Lila in the very early beginnings of the pandemic. Lila's like, I'm a researcher. I need to work with numbers. And she got a bunch of people together to put together a study, which is now evolved into the study that she's presented now. And that was that creativity and that sense of community, reaching out to people and just really learning more about people. And to what you were saying, Bianca, about that, going up the pyramid, it was always very structured, right? And you had to hit these different levels to get there. But one thing we realized during the pandemic is, no, we can go on an offshoot and get creative and do some really great work. So I think that at this point, I think I want to get us into the breakout rooms, because we've had some really good dialogue going here. Bianca provided us with this great, I'm going to read this book by Catherine May called Wintering. It's the idea that not all seasons are created equal. She says, without winter, the burgeoning energy of summer could not happen. Winter clears the way, those times when we're forced into darkness or when we feel the bite of the cold. So if we use that metaphor, what gifts have winter brought to you that are going to get you into your summer? Did I say that right, Bianca?
You nailed it, Bren. Yeah.
So that is the idea here, is think about what you're taking from the winter that's going to propel you into the summer to talk into your breakout groups. And Jess is going to get us all into groups, and then we'll come back to say goodbye.